So we will be out there and we'll show to the British people that you do not have to be an extremist or a BNP type to stand up openly and honestly and to talk about having a proper immigration policy. UKIP will do that. And we did last week issue our tax paper, making the point that the tax burden in this country has become too great. It's one of the reasons people, 200,000 a year plus people, are emigrating. They're moving abroad. Some of our brightest and best young people, just as back in the 1970s, are beginning to leave this country. They're going off to Australia. They're going off to America. They're going off to India, to China. They're going off to where they can see not just better opportunities, but more ability for the individual to keep more of what he or she has earned. And one of the common threads, one of the common themes about UKIP, the reason that we first all came together, is we in this party do not believe in excessive state control in our lives. We want freedom of the individual, and what greater freedom could there be than in having lower taxes? And it's much the same with education. Should not our three parties be hanging their heads in shame at the thought that 1 in 4 11-year-olds cannot read and write properly? I mean, that is the extent to which, in a relatively short space of 40 years, we have utterly destroyed the education system in this country. We've taken away from children, and I think this is especially important for boys, we've taken away from so many of them the chance to be taught to play sport properly, the chance to be told that you've got to compete, the idea that sometimes poor little Johnny has to come second, because life is like that. It's tough. It's a rat race out there. And I find it incredible that we are the only political party in Britain today that believes in selective education. We believe that Britain's brightest young children, and especially those from the poorest backgrounds, doesn't matter if you're rich, does it? You can choose the public school system, the private education system. But we believe that those bright people from poor backgrounds should be given the opportunity to have a grammar school education, should be given the opportunity to make the most of themselves. And I am very keen as a party, that we establish our reputation firmly. And once again, I want to do this with the young, as to where we stand on trade. You know, it is an incredible thing. But here we are, as the world's 5th largest economy, the world's 4th largest global trading nation, the world's 2nd largest global investor behind America. And here we are as a country that speaks English, the world's business language, with the phenomenal connections that we've got right across the English-speaking world, not to mention the old Commonwealth. And don't forget that in those Commonwealth countries, you've got nearly 1/3 of the world's population. So despite all of these comparative advantages, we as a nation are and have been forbidden from doing trade deals with other countries. We may not do that, because that is decided for us collectively by the European Commission. The European Commission has one trade policy for all 25 countries. And it just so happens, of course, that the Trade Commissioner, as Bruce touched on earlier, is Peter Mandelson. Although I disagree with many. There are many in this room, I think, that would say they thought it was wrong that Mandelson became the Trade Commissioner. I disagree entirely with that. I cannot think of anybody more perfectly suited to the European Commission than Peter Mandelson. We have got to regain the ability to make our own trade policy. The European Union is burying its head in the sand like an ostrich. That is why we have bra wars. That is why we now have limits on the number of cheap shoes that come into this country from Vietnam. You cannot hide away and pretend that globalization isn't happening. It is happening. It's happening rapidly. It's happening quickly. And the first and most obvious thing that an independent Britain would do with our own trade policy is we'd forge very quickly a trade deal with India. And incidentally, you get all this talk about China. I'll predict that it's India, because of its democracy, because despite the chaos, it does actually have some real form of structure. I predict that India will be the world's biggest and most successful global economy within 20 years, and the more closely we are allied to them and to their economy, the better chance our children and grandchildren are going to have of this being a prosperous country. So these are positive messages. I want to make UKIP the real voice of opposition in British politics, somebody giving an opposing view, somebody giving positive alternatives, somebody prepared to say that we should take back what is rightfully ours, our birthright to govern our own country. And I think this is a message that the British people are now ready for. It is perfectly obvious that New Labour have abandoned millions of traditionally patriotic working class Labour voters. It was completely obvious to me at Bournemouth the other week that the Conservative Party are now Blue Labour. They are trying to out-Blair Blair at the very moment when Blair's about to go. I mean, talk about funny timing, but there we are. But the Tories have totally given up on the idea of low taxation. They've totally given up on the idea of competition. They've totally given up even on the idea that we should take back our territorial fishing waters, that we should come out of the disastrous common fisheries policy. They've even given up on that. So there are many, many Tory votes we can take. And every opinion poll shows that up to 2/3 of Liberal Democrat voters, and this is very relevant, Mr. Chairman, in Cornwall and in Devon, up to 2/3 of Liberal Democrat voters do not want this country to be stuck in a United States of Europe. The trouble the Lib Dem voters have is that this party that goes around selling itself as the nice party, the all things to all people party, has never actually told its own voters what it stands for. And I would like to see UKIP down in this part of the world fighting in local elections next year, putting out some simple information to Liberal voters. You know, did you know that the Liberal Democrats want to impose the euro? Did you know that the Liberal Democrats support votes for prisoners? You know, all of it truthful, but all things that Liberal Democrat voters, it seems to me, need to be told. So there is a massive opportunity out there for this party. However, there's a lot the party itself has got to do. And we've got to turn this party into a disciplined and professional political machine. And I'm going to do all that I can to choose the right people, to get a team around me of people that I trust to get on and do this job. And I'm confident that we can create the right vehicle. I'm confident, as you've seen already, that we're developing the right policies that really will hit home with the people of this country. But we cannot do this, and we will not succeed at this, unless those of you who feel as we do something rather unusual and be a little more perhaps like the French than we're used to. And I say that because whenever one thinks of the French, they're actually rather good, aren't they, at standing up and fighting for themselves. And one of the difficulties with the English is we too easily let this stuff wash all over us and become negative. Well, there's going to be no negativity about UKIP. We've got the political wind with us. And I would say to all of you in this room, if you are already members of this party, supporters of this party, and I would say equally to those of you that aren't members of this party, if you agree with what you've heard this afternoon, then don't you owe it to yourselves? Don't you owe it to those that went before and were prepared to sacrifice everything in 2 world wars? Don't you owe it to all those people? Don't you owe it to your children and grandchildren to at least stand up and fight? If you agree with us, join me. Fight! To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.